Welcome to So Very Easy. My name is Laura, and today it is time for Block 8. Now this has been a free follow along from Quilting Confections, and the quilt has been called Rainbow Sorbet. I'm doing the quilt in two different colorways. The first one is I'm following the color selection that they've recommended or that have come with the kits. And the second color variation is my scrappy bin. I started with one large bold fabric with lots of colors in it and have just pulled in a bunch of scraps. So as I come across a scrap, it goes in here and I'm going to make all of the blocks with this combination. Where their background fabric is light, I'm replacing it with the dark. Block 8 is a block that consists of 4 of these pinwheels. Their color selection has this two-tone white, a sorbet color, 2 blues, and 2 different purples or mauves. There's going to be a white at a 2.5-inch square, and that is going to work for the center. The 2 long arms will consist of 4 pieces of fabric at 2.5 inches by 5.5 inches. The pinwheels are going to be made with the background fabric and then matched up with 2 different blues and 2 different purples. To make each pinwheel, we're going to need 4 different colors and 2 squares, which will make 4 half-square triangles. The squares are 4 inches. Now you can cut out the squares separately or put them together. You can even leave a little extra around the outside. So you'd have about 8.5 inches by about 4.25, 4.5 inches. They're going to be trimmed down so they don't have to be exact to start off with. And you can layer your 2 fabrics together, and you can just draw those 4-inch squares instead of cutting them. Draw a line from corner to corner. If you do it in a V formation, it's going to be really easy to stitch it. If you'd like, you can just do them in 2 4-inch squares separately, or an 8 by 4-inch piece of fabric. When we have the right sides joined together and all the lines drawn, we're going to be using this V line going from corner to corner as a guide. We need to stitch on each side of the line at a 1/4 inch. And you're going to be able to just use your 1/4 inch foot as a guide. I'll be stitching beside these 2 lines, so as long as my pins are out of that way, it's just going to save me time from having to remove them as I stitch. I also like to start with a piece of fabric, and I stitch on that fabric first. It just saves me time and I don't have to hold the thread. I'm just able to start stitching. I have my 1/4 inch foot on, so the edge of this foot will run along the edge of this drawn line. And because I've started with that fabric, I won't have to worry about the thread being pulled inside. I stitch right off that fabric, stop, and then hold that piece of fabric out of the way, put the foot down, and start stitching. This is going to stay out of the way, and I've not had to worry about any of the threads. And I'm going to follow that line. If you've left a little extra space, you're going to be able to stitch right up into this area. Turn your fabric without removing it. Now you can stitch down that second V. And if you need to, you can always adjust here so that that line follows the edge of the foot. I'm going to stitch right off of that fabric and onto my scrappy piece of fabric. Now I can remove that, stitch off that fabric again, and start stitching on the other side of the line. And I'm going to be able to stop right at the line where I drew the original square. Pivot your fabric and stitch down. And stitch onto another piece of fabric. Trim. I continually stitch over top of this fabric, one right after another. I have a little bowl beside my machine where I have all the little pieces of fabric, and I just keep using them so I don't have to worry about holding those threads for the next row of stitching. Now I'm going to be able to cut them apart on the diagonal lines and down the center. You're going to have 2 different purple and white combinations and 2 blue and white combinations. But throughout the project we've been using Eleanor Burns' Quilt in a Day 6.5 inch square up ruler. And one of the things the ruler is designed for is to trim up your half square triangles. On the ruler you have 2 different sides of measurements. You have your 1/2 inch and the full inch. We're going to turn these pieces that we stitched together into 3-inch squares. So we're going to look for that 3-inch line. That 3-inch line is going to be placed upon that stitching line, not the cut edge, right along your stitching line. So your seam allowance is not going to matter in this case. A 3-inch line right there on your stitching line. You're going to be able to trim off with a rotary cutter on both sides. With that piece cut off, the block is already squared up. When you open it up, it's going to be a perfect 3-inch square. You can trim off the little dog ears now. And I like to just do it with a pair of scissors. I go from that stitching line, and I point into the center. So those little ears are cut off. When this is pressed, those ears are not going to be sticking out. With the half square triangles done, all the components are ready to put the block together. We start with a 2.5 inch square, and we have 2 arms coming top and bottom to the right and left. In the squares, we need to make these little pinwheel blocks. Each blade of the pinwheel needs to be going in the same direction. It's just a matter of taking each block and moving it so that pinwheel is in that direction. And all 4 of the blocks need to be put together like this. Once you have them all laid out, it's easy just to pick up the board and bring them to the sewing machine. You'll need to sew each of those 4 pinwheels together first. Sew the 2 blocks together, and then those 2 blocks will go together. When the block has been stitched together, you're going to be able to take those seams and press them so they're going in a circular motion. And take a few threads right out of the top, and it's going to open up. The shape that you have in the block is a miniature of what you're going to have in this little point. And that's going to keep that nice and flat so you don't have a big bump. From here, this is going to go together really quickly. The 2 blocks are going to go on the center post, on both the top and the bottom, and then we're going to be able to sew this together in rows. The block is now done. I would recommend pressing the seams towards this smaller strip. It will just help keep those seams nice and flat. The scrappy variation is going to be very different. For the arms, I'm going to choose a light. The center block, which is their background fabric, is my background fabric. It just happens to be the dark color. And for my pinwheels, I still kept my dark background fabric and I've chose other colors. So when it gets all put together, this is the variation it can turn into. But because I have 4 of each of these blocks, and each of these blocks need 4, I can mix these up, and I can have 1 of each color in each block. And for this month, I'm going to sew it in this variation. So each block will have 1 of each of the colors. Scrappy version is now done. As I've been choosing the fabrics for the scrappy version, I've not really concentrated at all about fabric colors. I'm just using up scraps. So whatever scrap of fabric is going to match the best is the color that I'm using. This is putting a lot of fun in it, and I never know what the block is going to turn out like. So we have the scrappy version and the rainbow sorbet variation. Block 8 is now done, and boy did they turn out different. I'll put a link in the description to the free follow along Block of the Month from Quilting Confections. And as always, thank you for joining me today on Sew Very Easy. Feel free to subscribe and come on back. Let's see what we're sewing next time in the sewing room. Bye for now.